Okay, we will get started. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Yo antah pravishya mama vacha imam prashuptam sanjeevayati akhila shakti daraswadamna anyamshta hastacharana shravanatvagaadin pranan namo bhagavate purushaya tubhyam lasatu shrimadananda tirtendurno hrudambare yadvachas chandrika swanta santapam vinikrantati Padavakya Pramanagnan Pranamya Shirasa Gurun Vyakarishye Yatabhotam Vishnu Tattva Vinirnayam. So, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 13th session of Katha Upanishad. We have been doing contemplation of Katha Upanishad for about 4 or 5 months now. I just wanted to give you a brief update as to where we are. Katha Upanishad has got 2 adhyayas, first adhyaya and the second adhyaya. Each adhyaya has got 3 vallis. So far we have done 29 mantras of the first valli, and we have done 15 mantras of the second valli, and there are 10 more mantras to go to complete the second valli of this this adhyaya. And my aim today is to cover the last 10 mantras. Let's see if we can accomplish this. There's lots to talk about. We got about an hour and 15-20 minutes to complete this. So where were we last week? So we spent the whole 1 hour last week talking about this, one of the most profound mantras of Katha Upanishad. And I told you, if there is one mantra you want to know in Katha Upanishad, probably this is what it is, because this is the summary of the Sanatana Dharma. It is a summary of the Vedic philosophy. What does this mantra say? Sarve Vedaha Yatpadamamananti Tapamsi Sarvani cha Yadvadanti Yad Ichanto Brahmacharyam Charanti Tatte Padam Sangrahena Bravimi Om Ityetat. So Yama said, now that you want so keen to know about Brahman, learn the fundamentals. What are the fundamentals? The whole of the Vedas only talk about Brahman. There is nothing called Karma Kanda, Devata Kanda, and Upanishads. Every word, sound, letter, sentence, and paragraph talks only about Brahman. Even when you do deep contemplation of anything in the material world or in the scriptural world, eventually it lead on to Brahman. Tapamsi sarvanicha yadvadanti. So what do folks, Satvika Jivas, what do the Satvika Jivas do for them to make this progress? What do the Satvika Jivas do to make an effort to know about Brahman? Yadichanto brahmacharyam charanti. They control their indriyas, they control their indriyas, they follow celibacy, they go to Gurukula, they learn about the Vedas, they learn about Brahman through the Vedas. So brahmacharyam charanti. And Nachiketa, I will tell you in a very brief way. Tatte Padam, that aspect of Brahman, I'll tell you in a very brief way. If you don't have time in the mundane world and you want to know about one thing about Brahman, this is what I'm going to give you. This is the Bijakshara mantra that I'm going to give you so that you can contemplate this, not only in this material world. When you reach Brahman in Moksha Sthiti, you can use the same Bijakshara there as well. And what is that? Tatte Padam Sangrahena Bravimi Om Ityetat. Om is that word. Om is that sound that you need to understand. So we spent a good 1 hour last week talking about this Omkara Tattva. So I'm grateful for Padmajaji from Bangalore for giving us a quick summary of what we did last week. So Padmajaji is going to summarize Omkara Tattva for us over the next 3 to 4 minutes. Padmajaji, over to you.
Thank you, Madhusudanji. Namaskara to everyone. Mandokya Upanishad says, he who knows the real meaning and understanding of Omkara is a Muni. Om is the primordial sound of the creation. It is the original vibration of the universe. From this first vibration, all other vibrations are able to manifest. It is well substantiated that Sound vibration significantly impacts a person's physical, emotional, and mental state. By chanting Om, we can align our frequency with that of the original universal frequency, which is essential in spiritual practice. Purusha Shukta, Gayatri, Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads, and Brahma Sutras start from Om. Om is synonymous with Lord Narayana and his attributes. Om is called Pranava Mantra. Pranava, if we split Pranava into Pra and Nava, Pra means Prakrushta. Nava means new or 9 forms of bhakti or stuti or stotra. So Om is the most auspicious stuti that celebrates Gnananandamaya Brahman. Om is also called Bijakshara mantra, like a majestic tree that can be generated from a tiny seed. The glorious tree of spirituality can grow from the sincere chanting of Om. Entire Veda is compressed in Om, so it is called Bijakshara mantra. Om can also be written as A-U-M, Akara, Ukara, and Makara, where Akara, A is negation, opposite of something. Understand what God is not. He is not made of Panchabhuta. He has Aprakrita Sharira. He is Anandamaya and has infinite bliss. Ukara, U, is Uttama or Utkarsha. He is beyond Kshara and Kutakshara. He is at the highest level. And Makara or M is Mana or Gnana, and he has infinite knowledge. According to Garuda Purana, God is beyond our reach. He cannot be seen through sense, cannot be understood through logic, and can be only understood through Vedas and Upanishads. There is limitation, and we can know him according to our capacity. Om also corresponds to Vedas, where A, Akara is Padya, that is Rigveda. Ukara, U is Gadya, that is Yajur, Makara, M is Gana or Samaveda. Om, as explained in Mandukya Upanishad, represent 4 states of consciousness of Jiva and is totally controlled by Brahman. The symbol of Om consists of curves, crescent, and a dot. And we are all familiar with it. It is displayed in the screen. The lower curve marks the wakeful state, that is Jagrati Sthana. Here, the mind identifies with physical body and perceives the world through the senses. Vaishwanara form of Brahman, present in pineal gland in our body, controls the state. The upper curve indicates the deep sleep state, that is Shushupti Sthana. It is the state of total unawareness. You are withdrawn from both physical and mental activities. Prajna form of Brahman, present in the thymus gland in our body, controls this. In this state, Jiva doesn't know that he is in close proximity with God. The middle curve represents the dream state, that is Swapnasthana. It is in between wakeful and deep sleep state. Tejasa form of Brahman, present in thyroid gland in our body, controls this state. The dot is the symbol of enlightenment, that is Turiya state or Moksha. This state is beyond mundane senses. Jiva is in close proximity with Brahman, but with full knowledge. Vasudeva controls this state. The crescent represents Maya or Ajnana, which separates the 3 curves from the dot. Ajnana binds an individual soul to the material world. With the guidance of Guru, scriptures, and by the grace of Supreme, one can transcend the 3 curves of material consciousness and attain the dot of enlightenment, that is moksha. Krishna Arpanamastu.
Wonderful, Padmachaji. That's a very, very, very comprehensive summary of Omkara Tattva. So we move on to Neetaji. So if you can recall, last week we were just having a very brief discussion I've told you again this several times. Whenever we do Katha Upanishad, we should always find inspiration in a verse in Gita as well, because they're both closely related to each other. And Neetaji brought to our attention that there is a verse very similar to the current verse that we are talking, and that's in chapter 8:11. So Neetaji, would you like to recite and give us a brief purport of this verse, please? Thank you.
Yeah. Hari Om. So if I start by chanting, Yadaksharam Veda Vido Vadanti, Vishanti Yadyatayo Vitaragaha, Yadichanto Brahmacharyam Charanti, Tatte Padam Sangrahena Pravakshe. So if you can see that the 8-11 is very similar, and Madhuji has just now explained, and also in very detailed form in the previous lecture, that the last two sentences, as you can see, the last two parts is Yadichanto, that is very, very similar. So we've already covered 8-11 or 8th chapter in our Gita sessions in the past. It is about what is described in it is what decides the destination of soul after death, and how to attain Brahman, or how to get to the right destination by thinking of God all the time, thinking of qualities, attributes, chanting his name, and of course, Om, as Padmajaji has mentioned, that is the key word that we all should remember. So important things again here is what is described in this particular shloka is Krishna, Sri Krishna is saying, it is all the people who know Vedas are describing this. What are they describing? Describing Om, and how to reach the Aksharam, or the person, or Sri Krishna himself. And that is the Padam. So Padam, again, I want to highlight a few words here. Padam. So that is the goal that we all should aim for, is reaching that Aksharam. Padam is the goal. Padam is also used, we come across Padam word in different shlokas, in 251, in 1856, that's 18 chapter 56 verse, and 1314. We have come across the Padam word in 15.4 and 15.5. If you all remember the 15th chapter, Nirmana Moha Jita Sanga Dosha Adhyatma Nitya Vidiputta Kamaha Dvandvair Vimukta Sukadukha Sangai Gachyantya Mudha Padam Avyayam. So Padam comes there too. So that is again to remind us that we need to cross reference to other verses within Gita itself. And Madhuji has just explained about Brahmacharyam Charanti, and Yadichanto means desires. So with that, I will end my small talk for today. Just remind us, reminding us how Katha Upanishad and Gita are very, very closely linked, and how the Upanishads, Gita and Brahma Sutras are all linked, and we get information from all the three Prasthanatrayas.
Thank you, Neetaji. Great compilation. So we just move on. So Tatte Padam Sangrahena Bravimi Om iti etat Yad Aksharam. Okay, so, and again, we have done this before. Omkara, this sound, the name Omkara in the Upanishads and in the Vedic scripture, in the Vedic literature, as well as in Puranas and so on, it takes various forms. This Brahman, as you know, has got infinite names, of course, but there are a few names of his that is celebrated within the Vedic scripture. For example, Aksharam is another very, very significant word that is usually used to celebrate the Supreme Brahman. Yeah, the Supreme Brahman is called Aksharam. But there is Kutasto Aksharam, which is Shri Tattva. Then there is the Aksharas, which is Jivas who get moksha and then become Aksharas. But in the samsara state, they are still Ksharas because they have a perishable body. This we know from the chapter 15, the last 5 verses of chapter 15 of the Gita. So the Supreme Aksharam is the Supreme Brahman, who is none else than our Om, the person who goes with the name Omkara. So to bring home this kind of concept, what our friend, our Guru Yama immediately says after this verse is, this is the new verse for today. He says, Etadeva Aksharam Brahma, Etadeva Aksharam Param, Etadeva Aksharam Nyatva, Yo Yadichasi Tasya Tat. Yeah, so this is again very, very clear. These are easy verses. We are all very familiar with some of the words that we have done over the last 2-3 years in various sessions, that these words will be very familiar to do. So what are all the words that we have got? Previous word, we got Om. Here we got Aksharam. Then we got Brahma. Then we got Paramam. Aksharam Param. Aksharam Param. So look at all these words as very familiar words because we have done all these sessions before. So this should again remind us of chapter 15, 16th verse. So who is going to repeat this? I am never tired of getting us all to repeat chapter 15, all the verses, but we pick up various verses in this class, for example, and contemplate again. So who is going to take on 15, 16, please? Chapter 15, 16. Okay, if there is no enthusiastic volunteer, I'm going to pick up Pragnesh ji. Go for it.
Thank you very much.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'll start. Dvamyo purusho loke kshara eva cha kshara sarvani bhutani kutasthoksara uchyate.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Pragnesh ji. So that Akshara, again, we know that Akshara is the Supreme Brahman. And we have done the etymology of the word Akshara before. Go back to the previous sessions to try and grasp what it means. So here Yama said that Etadeva Aksharam. This Omkara Tattva is Akshara. Etadeva Aksharam. So there is no confusion with this. Then he also says Etadeva Brahma. He himself is also called Brahma. Om is Brahma. Why? Atakasmad uchyate brahmeti bruhanto hi asmin gunaha. And as Padmajaji mentioned, Omkara Tattva is a celebration of the Brahman as an abode of infinite auspicious attributes and Sarva Guna Purna. So that Sarva Guna Purnatva is in time, space, and attributes. So Atakasmad uchyate brahmeti bruhantoi asmin gunaha. So Yama says Etadeva Brahma. Etadeva Aksharam Param. So the same Brahma, this Omkara, is also celebrated as Aksharamam Paramam. So among all indestructibles, he is Param. He is the highest. He is the highest among all indestructibles. So from chapter 15 of the Gita, we clearly understand what is that highest Akshara. And as I told you, that is this Vishnu or Narayana, which Yama is again says the same thing. So Etadeva Aksharam Brahma, Etadeva Aksharam Param, Etadeva Aksharam Nyatva. So he who knows this Brahman, Etadeva Aksharam Nyatva, yo yad ichchati tasya tat. So what does that mean? So he who knows this Akshara Namaka Paramatma, he who knows this Brahman, what does that mean? Not just knowing. So you just know about the person and you just don't stop there. You do contemplation, Shravana, Manana, Dhyana, Nitidhyana, then you develop devotion, you develop bhakti, then you pray to him, you spend years of your current life or multiple births to do that bhakti yoga, and eventually he sheds his grace, and then you cross over to the moksha sthiti. Okay, then you have your liberation. So there are two things that Yama is saying. He who knows this Brahman, in this samsara itself, yo yad ichchati tasya tat. Whatever he wants, he gets. Not only in samsara, but actually eventually when you cross over to the Vaikunta, there the definition of the state of Vaikunta itself is you get whatever you desire. Yeah. So this verse is again, it's fairly straightforward for us to understand this verse. Etadeva Aksharam Brahma, Etadeva Aksharam Param, Etadeva Aksharam Nyatva, Yo Yadichati Tasya Tat. So from this verse, we understand that this Omkara Tattva is Akshara, he is Brahman, he is Akshara, Param Aksharam, and then he is Harihi, he is Narayana, he is Vishnu. So everything is synonymous with this Omkara Tattva. In fact, our Guru Yama himself will say, Tad Vishnoho Paramam Padam in subsequent verses. He will then finally declare that this Padam that Neetaji was talking about, that destination is Vishnu himself. Okay, clear evidence that the view of Vedic scripture and the Upanishads is when they talk about Brahman, they don't talk about some nebulous entity, but they talk about this Vishnu Tattva. Yeah, and the clear evidence comes from Katha Upanishad itself when Yama says Tad Vishnoho Paramam Padam. Okay, so this verse is a beautiful verse, and again I would encourage all of us to memorize these verses. They're so beautiful, but also they are very, very elegant verses for our contemplation. Now, in this context, I just wanted to pick up a couple of verses from Atharvana Upanishad, also called Mundaka Upanishad, as you know, which actually talks about, it tells us how we can run our lives with these two words, Om and Akshara. Okay. Yes, we discussed Om equals Akshara equals Brahman equals Akshara Brahman. But this Upanishad gives us a metaphor as to how we can run our lives with this. So it takes these two words, Omkara and Aksharam, Om and Aksharam, and it takes an example of an archer. How an archer uses the bow and he takes the arrow and he hits the target. So the Upanishad in couple of verses, it gives really beautiful metaphor using this. So what does it say? Danur Gurhitva Upanishadam Mahastram Sharam hi upasa nishitam sandiyita. Ayamya tad bhavagatena chetasa lakshyam tadeva aksharam somya viddhi. So he says, take this bow called the Upanishad, use the arrow sharpened by meditation and draw with the mind fixed on Brahman and hit the target. What is that target? The Aksharam. Okay. This is how it gives us a clue as to how you should do our upasana or practice, where we use the bow, which is the Shastras, focus our mind, which is the arrow, and target this towards Akshara. Okay. The same Upanishad in the very next verse gives a slightly different perspective. Pranavo Danuhu Sharohi Atma Brahmata Lakshyam Uchyate. Okay. So in this it says, now similarly, take this bow as the Omkara. This arrow is the Atma. And what should you do? You direct yourself with this bow towards this target called the Brahman. So our Upanishads in various places, they talk about this Omkara and Akshara as the key entities that we should focus our attention towards for progress in life. And then our Guru Yama then goes on to the very next verse. Again, it's a fairly easy verse because we have learned a lot about Aksharam and Brahma and Aksharam Param already. Then he says, Etad alambanam shreshtam, etad alambanam param, etad alambanam nyatva brahmaloke mahiyate. Okay. So alambanam, so we need to understand this. How many times the alambanam has come? Etad alambanam shreshtam, etad alambanam param, etad alambanam nyatva. So 3 times, again 3 times Yama uses alambanam. So what does alambanam means? Alambanam literally means supporter. He who supports. Yeah. Who is our supporter? He is alambanam. Okay. Etad, again, I've told you so many times. Etad means somebody who is very close to us. Who is very close to us? In that small cave in the thymus, inside our heart. So Jiva, inside the Jiva is the Paramatma. And that Paramatma is very close to the Jiva. So he is always addressed as Etad. Okay. Etad alambanam shreshtam. He is the highest. So here in these verses, Yama is, remember in the second Valli, Yama is still in the prelude. He's still giving us the introduction about who this great supreme entity Brahman is. And he is praising him, without limits. He is just in ecstatic mood, praising this Brahman. So he says, Etad alambanam shreshtam. He is my greatest supporter. Yama is also a Jiva, right? Like you and me, he is a higher Jiva than us. But he himself says, Etad alambanam shreshtam. This supporter of me is the highest. Etad alambanam param. He is again the greatest. Yeah. And he says, Etad alambanam nyatva. He who knows this supporter, he who knows that there is inside me my antaryamin, who is my supporter. He who understands this, I am different. My antaryamin is different. My antaryamin is supporting me in all activities of my life. Satta, Pramiti, and Pravriti. These are all the 3 things that the Jivas ever do in their careers. In all these 3 aspects, our antaryamin is actually supporting us. He who understands this and conducts his life, what happens to him? Etad alambanam nyatva Brahmaloke mahiyate. Okay. So what is Brahmaloka? So Brahmaloka there becomes an interesting word because it gives you 2 ideas about what is Brahmaloka. Mahiyate. Mahiyate means he is respected there. Okay, so we need to understand what does this mean. It's interesting. Again, these are all the evidences in the Upanishads and Vedas that tell us what is the journey of souls. How do the souls make the journey in their careers from creation. So Brahma Loke. So Brahma, we all know about Brahma. In the highest sense, Brahma means Brahman, right? The Supreme Lord. Atakasmad uchyate brahmeti bruhanto hi asmin gunaha. We are 100 times, million times looked at this verse and we are all experts in that. But Brahma also means Chaturmukha Brahma. It can also mean Chaturmukha Brahma, right? So it has two aspects to it. So Brahmaloke Mahiyate. So he who understands that there is an Antaryamin in me and he is supporting me and he runs and he is controlling me and he runs all his life in that approach, this chap eventually what will happen to him? He will go to Brahmaloka. Okay, so the lokas, we all know these lokas. So who is going to, I'm going to break for a few seconds. So who is going to tell us the various lokas of that we know of creation? I think Devalji, if she is around in today's call. So Devalji, do you want to come on here for talking to us about various lokas?
So the top, there are 7 on the top and 7 at the bottom. So Bhuvar Loka and then Swarga Loka. I think there is Mahar Loka. No, there's something. Satya Loka is the topmost one. There are 2 more in between.
Yeah, so it's there in the slide itself. You're allowed to look at the slide there.
I can't read the slide. And I think the bottom ones are Atala, Vatala, last is Patal.
Okay.
And then Mahakal, I think, where the boiling takes place.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. So there are 14 lokas, right? So you have so if you take Bhuloka as the base, then you have 7 above: Bhuvarloka, Suvarloka, Maharloka, Janaloka, Tapaloka, and the Satyaloka highest, which is the abode of Chaturmukha Brahma. Okay, and then below Earth, of course, you have Atala, Vitala, Sutala, Talatala, Mahatala, Rasatala, Patala. So these are all lower planetary systems that Puranas, Bhagavatam talks about this in great detail. So when you look at this verse, Yetad alambanam nyatva brahmaloke mahiyate. So in there, so he is talking about the career of soul. So what will happen to you, Nachiketa? You know that if you understand Yetad alambanam shreshtam, Yetad alambanam param, then if you understand and run your life like that, you will eventually go to Satyaloka. And you will be in the companion with Chaturmukha Brahma. And as you know, so what is the age of Chaturmukha Brahma at this point? Shushrutji, you are the expert on that. Can you guide us about what is the current age of Chaturmukha?
In Brahma years, 50 years and 1 day.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Sushruti. So our current Brahma is 50 years and one day old. So we have to hang around in Brahmaloka along with Chaturmukha Brahma until he completes his century, until he completes his 100 years. So when you are there in Brahmaloka, okay, so Yama is our guru. Yama is saying in the Brahmaloka, you will be respected. Okay, so you will be respected as somebody who has joined Brahmaloka and you have done such a great work. So people who are below you. So again, it talks to you about, so this is something called Taratamya that certain schools of Vedantic philosophy talk about everywhere in the universe, there is gradation. Yeah, so not all souls are the same. If some folks think all souls are the same, good luck to them, but we don't see it in practical life. Every soul is different with regards to its attributes, regards to its capacity for jnanananda's capacity to experience its bliss, capacity to be in communion with Supreme, and so on. So there are certain schools of Vedanta that talk about it. And if you look at this verse, it seems to support that. It says, Brahmaloke mahiyate. And he is respected in the Brahmaloka. What does that mean? Does that mean Chaturmukha Brahma is going to respect this soul? No. Chaturmukha Brahma is the highest amongst jivas. So we should be respecting him, not the other way around. So what this verse actually means is, the souls that are in gradation who are below this soul will be respecting him. this soul will be respecting somebody else who is above him. And ultimately, they will all constantly be respecting Chaturmukha Brahma in Satyaloka. In fact, Shastras talk about how in Satyaloka, Chaturmukha Brahma is still doing Veda Pata, and he is talking about Brahma Sutra, and they are all, singing the hymns of Vedas. In fact, I have got a verse at the end, and I hope there is a chance to talk about it from Taittiriya Upanishad, where Chaturmukha is singing hymns of the Vedas, and all the jivas are there, and the ones that are understood, and have crossed to and gone to Satyaloka, the ones that are below him will be respecting him. Okay, so etad alambanam nyatva brahmaloke mahiyate. So that is about Chaturmukha Brahma's loka, which is Satyaloka. Okay, but it also means eventually when this Chaturmukha's 100 years is over, you will be crossing over to that side. So I've got a quiz for us. So this is the transempirical plane, and this is the material plane. Our greatest guru Chaturmukha is still in the material plane. Yeah, this current Chaturmukha is still in the material plane. And when his lifetime comes to an end, he also needs to move on to the transempirical plane. And when he moves, he takes all the jivas with him, and they all make this journey, and they shed their linga sharira at that point. Linga sharira is still there, right, as an attachment to the soul. So they have to shed their linga sharira and go to the other side. So what is that river? Who is going to answer that question?
Madhu, I can.
Okay, go for it.
Virija River.
Thank you. Pragneshji, what is your answer?
Vaitarni.
Vaitarni. Okay, so that's interesting. So we'll have to go and check whether Vaitarni and Viraja are the same. Probably they are synonymous. So Pragneshji, do you want to talk about this a bit more? Vaitarni, that's a new term.
Unfortunately, I don't know more than these. Only my father used to quote to my mom that you don't have to worry anything. I will take you. That's the only thing. Sorry for that.
Okay, fine. So let's do some research.
I have heard, Madhu. I think Vaitarani and Viraja Nadi, it is same. Garuda Purana says Viraja Nadi, but the other name I think is Vaitarani.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Sheilaji. So we learned something new there. Vaitarani and Viraja are synonymous. Thank you, Sheilaji, for that. So once we cross that Viraja Nadi and shed our Linga Sharira, and we go to Brahmaloka. That Brahmaloka is Vishnu Loka. Because why? Vishnu means Vishalpyapto, that which is pervasive of time, space, and gunas. Brahman means what? Brihantohi asmin gunaha, that which pervades all time, space, and so on. And Omkara is what? That which pervades everywhere. What does Aksharam means? Akshnotiti Aksharam, that which pervades everywhere. So they're all synonymous. They all mean the name, means the same. So when you take that aspect, then it makes sense. Etad alambanam nyatva brahmaloke mahiyate. So he will eventually cross and go to the supreme Brahman. His loka is called Vishnu Loka or Vaikunta, where this jiva will be there. And again in the jivas, there are all these infinite jivas in mokshas. And, they are ultimately, of course, they are all praying to this Brahman always. But the ones that are highest, so again in moksha, the Upanishad says, all us, you and I, when we cross the Viraja Nadi, what will happen is we will still be praying to Chaturmukha Brahma, who has also had his liberation. We will still be praying to the ones that are above us. So Brahmaloke mahiyate. So it's a beautiful verse. Etad alambanam shreshtam. Etad alambanam param. Etad alambanam nyatva brahmaloke mahiyate. So then, as soon as this is done, our friend, our guru, Yama comes up with this beautiful verse, which we will all be familiar. So I'm going to get one of you to be ready with Gita chapter 220 verse, because look at the similarity. And we have said always study Kata with Gita. Yeah. So what is it? Na jayate mriyate va vipaschit. Na ayam kutaschin na babuva kashchit ajo nityaha shashvato ayam purano na hanyate hanyamane sharire. So what Yama is saying is, look, we have to follow Yama's thinking here. We should not take this verse in isolation. We should always look at what is the context in which this verse in Katha Upanishad has come. So what does this come? Yama has said, like Etad alambanam nyatva brahmaloke mahiyate. So you have actually crossed and gone to moksha. So now Yama says, when a soul is in moksha, what is its situation? Okay, that is what this verse talks about. So what I want you to do is, one of you pick up this verse in Gita 2:20. Let's recite this and then we'll compare and contrast, which makes it interesting. So who wants to take this verse? Sheilaji, do you want to do this?
Which one, Madhu?
Gita 2:20, right side.
Okay. न जायते म्रियते वा कदाचिन् नायं भूत्वा भविता वा न भूयः अजो नित्यः शाश्वतोऽयं पुराणो न हन्यते हन्यमाने शरीरे.
Yeah, thank you, Sheilaji. Very, very beautifully recited. Again, the wordings are extremely similar with a few changes here and there of the words. For example, vipaschit, here kadachit. That is the difference. Vipaschit and kadachit. And here, na ayam kutaschin, na ayam bhutva bhavita. Okay, vana bhuyaha. So you have to look at the subtle changes that Krishna has made in Gita. Well, it's not Krishna, it's Veda Vyasa, who is Krishna, who is Narayana's incarnation himself, who has made these changes in the Gitas, but they give us similar kind of concepts. So what is Yama talking about? The situation of jivas. What is the nature of jivas in moksha is what he's talking about. So before we go to that, we need to understand what is this vipaschit actually means. And then that will tell you, that will clearly inform you what the verse is all about. So vipaschit. And in our the way we do our Upanishad Chintana, we always break it open. So how do you break it open? V plus Pashya plus Chit. Okay. Pashya means what? To see. Okay. Chit means that Satchitananda Ananda Swarupa, that is Brahman. So what are we doing? Pashya Chit. So we are seeing this Brahman. How? Vipashya. Vipashya means Vilakshana, Vishishta, Vishesha. This, see it in all his glory. Okay, we see him in all his glories in moksha. We are, as Padmajaji mentioned, in moksha sthiti, in the Turiya state, we are in constant companion of the Supreme, and we are always aware that we are in companionship with the Supreme. So here our Yama says, how are we aware? As a Vipashchan, an Aparoksha Jnani who has seen the Lord. First point is he reaches Brahmaloka, he reaches Vaikuntha, and there he is also seeing him in all his glories. That is the first point. So this is a clear definition, reason why this verse actually talks about the state of jivas in moksha. And Yama says, you know what, once you have crossed the Viraja Nadi and you have gone to the moksha sthiti, or even when you are in Satyaloka, you're not going to be born again. You're not going to come back to Mrityaloka. You will be staying in Satyaloka. And once you go to moksha, again, you will be staying in moksha. You're not going to come back. So that is what he's talking about. Na jayate. Jayate means birth. So in moksha sthiti, there is no birth. There is no birth back to samsara. Na mriyate. You don't die. If you're not born, there is no scope for you to die because you don't have a material contact there in the moksha at all. So na jayate, na mriyate. Why? So this is an important point, and this is high levels of philosophy. When Krishna in 2:12 said, Natvevaham jatunatam, so you are all familiar with that verse, right? Sushru, do you want to recite that verse?
Natve vaham jatu nasam natatvam ne me janadipaha nachaiva na bhavishyama sarve vyamatam param.
Thank you, Sushuddhi. Beautiful. I caught you on the spot, but you did exceptionally well. Thank you so much. So why is it that the souls are also eternal? Why should it be so? Okay, because here Yama says, Na ayam kutashchit. God also has no birth or death, and this God is always an antaryamin in the jivatma. So as long as the God is, as long as the Paramatma is there, the jivatma is always going to be there. Although they are different, they're eternally related. The eternality of the jivas, as you know, is eternally related to the eternal Supreme. And that is what our friend Yama says here. Na ayam kutashchit. God has no birth or death. Okay, so if you meditate and do your upasana as God is eternal, God has no birth, then you will also realize and attain your state, which is also eternal. Yeah. Tam yata yata upasate sa tataiva bhavati, as our scripture says. Okay. And he also qualifies, when you are in moksha, na babuva kashchit. Jiva Swarupa also doesn't have birth or death. This is an important point. The Jiva Swarupa is unborn. There was never a time, right, that as Sushrutji was reciting the 212 verse, chapter 212 verse, Natvevaham jatanasam natvam neme janadipaha nacha bhavishyamaha sarve vayam ataha param. So where what we have to understand is even the Jiva Swarupa is unborn. Okay, and he talks about your swarupa in moksha, you know how it is going to be. Again, ajaha, nityaha, shashwataha. Jiva swarupa even in samsara is unborn. Jiva Swarupa is eternal even in samsara. Jiva Swarupa does not change in samsara. Even in the samsara state, if the Jiva Swarupas don't change, then it is assumed and it is implied, and we understand that even in the moksha sthiti, Jiva Swarupa is unborn. Jiva Swarupa is eternal. Jiva Swarupa does not change in any form. Whatever it does in its career, the Jiva's Swarupa never changes. Okay, this is all core philosophy of Sanatana Dharma. No school of Vedanta has ever dared to say that Jiva was ever created. No school of Vedanta has dared to say this. No school of Vedanta has ever said that the Jiva Swarupa will change. Because if the Jiva Swarupa changes, that is the same as destroying one Jiva and creating a new one. Okay, so no Vedantic school accepts that. So I want you to think about it. However difficult the concept may be, ruminate on this and think about it. Okay, I am Puranaha. This Jiva and Antaryami, they're ancient. Puram Ananti. So that is one, they are ancient, and the other one, Puranaha, has two meanings there. One is ancient, the other one is Puram Ananti. So what does that mean? So this Jiva in the samsara state, what is it doing? It is going from one body to another. Although it is ancient, although it is unborn, although it is eternal, although its Swarupa is unchanged, it is going, in body to body in the samsara state until it reaches the moksha state. And then he makes a very clear argument, na hanyate hanyamane sharire. So in the samsara state, what is happening? Even though the body is destroyed, the jiva is not destroyed. And in the moksha sthiti, the jiva swarupa itself is the body. Okay, and that of course is not destroyed. So in this one verse, najayate mriyate va vipaschit na ayam kutaschin babuva kashchid ajo nityaha shashwato ayam purano na hanyate hanyamane sharire. Yama actually he gives a comprehensive view of the state of the jivas in moksha, and he compares and contrasts to some extent what happens in the samsara, but reminds us that we never die. We are never born, we don't die. Our bodies might, but we don't. And that is a similar concept that Krishna uses when he is talking about this eternality of souls to Arjuna, and Veda Vyasa has changed some words relevant to the context in which this is being described. Yeah, so again, we don't have time to go through all these sounds, and of course Sushruji recited this, and there is the Gita 2:17, right? I don't know if anybody wants to take this one, and one for 2:27, please. 2:17, who wants to take 2:17?
I'll try.
Yeah.
Avinashi tu tadvidhi yena sarvam idam tatam vinasham avyayasyasya na kaschit kartu maharti.
Yeah, fantastic. They will, yeah, very well said. So that's good. So yeah, Neetaji, do you want to do the 2:18?
Yes. अन्तवन्त इमे देहा नित्यस्योक्ता शरीरिणः अनाशिनो प्रमेयस्य तस्माद्युध्यस्व भारत.
Thank you, Shilaji. So that is talking about the eternality of souls. There are three key verses, 2:12, 2:17, 2:18, and of course 2:20. So we should all memorize that and keep it in our fingertips. And in samsara, in the samsara state, what does Krishna say? 2:27. Who wants to do 2:27 here? Pragnesh, do you want to go for it?
जातस्य हि ध्रुवो मृत्यु ध्रुवं जन्म मृत्युस्य च तस्माद् परिहार्येऽर्थे न त्वं शोचितुमर्हसि.
Yeah, thank you, Pragneshi. So there, see, Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityuhu dhruvam janma mritasya. There, dhruvam means certain, absolutely firm, absolutely certain that the one that is born will have to die, and the one that dies will be born again. So that is talking about the samsara state as well. So these are all beautiful verses. We can spend weeks and days talking about this, but what Yama does is in his very very summarized, very shortened form, in his verses he is giving these amazing words for us to contemplate. Vipaschit, na jayate, na mriyate, ajaha, nityaha, shashvataha, puranaha, all those important words for us to think about the deep philosophy of what Sanatana Dharma is talking about. So next verse is even more interesting. So look at the sequence here. So everything here is similar to Gita. So that is why I have put this here. So who wants to recite 2:19?
Shall I read, Madhu?
Yeah.
Yayenam veti hantaram yaschainam manyate hatam ubhau tau na vijanito nayam hanti na hanyate.
So again, what is the Gita, what is Krishna is talking about? He's talking about this eternality of the souls in this section, right? And the same thing Yama also is picking up here in the Katha Upanishad, and he's talking about the eternality of souls in samsara, and of course the eternality of souls in moksha sthiti is assumed. Yeah. So to understand the verse in Gita and in Katha Upanishad, they both talk the same thing in this verse with slight different angles to it. So when somebody is killing another person, there are two concepts here, right? So there is this chap who is the killer, and then there is this person who is killed. Okay, so hanta chet manyate hantum, that is what Katha Upanishad says. So what does that mean? If the killer, there is a killer here who's got a sword and he's going to be killing this person, very similar, this could be Arjuna and this could be Bhishma. Okay, in this context it could be Arjuna, this could be Bhishma. Yeah. So hanta chet manyate hantum, if this fellow Arjuna or a killer thinks that he is killing Bhishma Acharya or some other person, he is mistaken. Also, hataschen manyate hatam. So if this fellow, if the killed thinks that he can be killed, oh, I am being killed, or this person is killing me, oh, after 100 years I am going to die. If you start thinking like that, ubhautau na vijanitaha. So both these fellows, the killer and the killed, both of them are actually in a state of ignorance. Ubhautau na vijanitaha. Na ayam hanti. Actually, you know what? This fellow is actually not the killer, and na hanyate. This fellow is not killed, because all that has happened in this situation is that this body with this material hand using a material sword has pierced into another material body. Yeah, and the blood is coming out, whatever. But actually, the souls that are there in these two folks, they are never killed. Yeah, that is what Yama is giving an example in Katha Upanishad and explaining. And as you know, Katha Upanishad is Apaurushaya. It is eternal scripture. It has always existed, Katha Upanishad. So Veda Vyasa in chapter 2:19 picks up on this verse with a slight modification, and he also talks about the same concept. So in Gita, the verses, there are two individuals, for example, an individual 1 and individual 2. These two guys are observing. They are observing a killer killing another person. So if this person assumes, enam veti hantaram, yeah, he is the killer, So if this fellow assumes that this fellow is a killer, okay, so in this context, Arjuna may be seeing, say, Bhima killing somebody. Okay, so doer. So killer is an action, right? So he is a killer is something like a doership. So if this fellow, the person one, assumes that the killer is the doer, and there is another person who is could be Drona Bhishmacharya, who is seeing Arjuna killing all these fellows, and Drona Bhishma seeing others being killed. If this person sees that person being killed, which could be again, of course, Drona or Bhishma, and the fellow see this person and thinks he is killed. So both these individuals, ubautau na vijanitaha. Yeah, yeshtenyam manyate hatam. So you can see the subtle differences there, and I hope it's useful when we contemplate Kata and Gita, because they talk about the same concept but from slightly different angles. So who is this ignorant person one? An ignorant, ubau tau na vijanitaha. Ubau means two. So who are these two individuals? Ignorant number one, he who thinks that Jiva is an independent doer. Okay, he is an ignorant number one in this equation. Ya enam veti hantaram. So if this fellow sees this fellow killing somebody but thinks that this fellow is an independent killer, he is the first ignorant person. The second person is he who thinks that the Jiva is mortal, because this fellow is seeing this fellow getting killed and somehow is assumed that the Jiva is getting killed here. No, it is just the body which is going to stop functioning. The material body is going to stop functioning. So these are the two concepts of ignorance. Jiva is an independent doer is first ignorance. The second one is Jiva is mortal. Why are they ignorant? Because they haven't understood the fact that there is the Antaryamin inside who is the independent doer. We have some amount of free will, but we do not have independent free will. If anybody thinks they have the independent free will, that is the reason for our samsara. Okay, so we are dependent beings. So that is the first concept. And the second one is Jiva, of course, is eternal. Okay, the reason why this is all interesting is, and again, as I told you before, if we compare and contrast the Puranas, then we get lots more information. So there is this something called Uddhava Gita, right? So who is going to tell us about Uddhava Gita? What is Uddhava Gita? Some of you might have studied Uddhava Gita.
Yeah, before Krishna wanted to leave this mortal world, he tells everyone that they will all be, they will all go back with him. But Uddhava, he asked him to stay, and he told them, he repeated the Gita to him again. Almost same as what he said, Bhagavad Gita, but maybe a little different, I think. Almost same.
Yeah,
so Uddhava is the one who stays back to the, what Krishna's prachar. He wants to explain it to he has to explain it to the world, the Bhagavatam. That was what was written in the Bhagavatam.
Brilliant, Shilaji. Thank you so much. So that's in the 11th canto, right? Uddhava Gita. So in that, the reason why I brought this here was, it's interesting because this particular Katha Upanishad verse is linked with this Uddhava Gita verse, where Hanta aham hato ayam iti laukikaha. So Krishna says, you know what Uddhava, Arjuna had assumed that he is the killer and somebody else is getting killed. He was in that state of ignorance, and I had to actually teach him. So, and then he starts talking about his greatness. Aham Atma Uddhavam Isham Bhutanam Suhrud Ishwaraha Aham Sarvani Bhutani Tesham Stiti Udbhava Apyayaha. So he talks about, so this is basically, once he's used this verse, he goes on and talks about, he's actually a repetition of chapter 10 of Gita. As Shilaji mentioned, the Gita is discussed in Uddhava Gita again. So chapter 10 of the Gita, again, have a small quiz. What is chapter 10 of the Gita? What does it talk about? What adhyaya is it?
Vibhuti Yoga.
Fantastic. Thank you. So it talks about the greatness of the Supreme, Vibhuti Yoga. So he goes and talks about Aham Gatir, Gatimam, Kalaha, Kalayatam, Aham Gunanam Cha. So it is exactly the same as the Vibhuti Adhyaya. So starting off from this concept of Na Ayam Hanti, Na Hanyate. Okay, so of Katha Upanishad. So again, as you can see how the Paurusheya Agamas like Gitas and Bhagavata Puranas, they all get their inspiration from Apaurusheya Vedas such as Kataka Upanishad. And hopefully this slide illustrates that idea. Okay, so this concept of Atma comes in this Aham Atma. So this Atma, again, you know, as you know, it has got various connotations. Atma can mean the body, Atma can mean the mind, Atma can mean the intellect. Atma can mean Jiva, Atma can mean Brahman. Now, when you take Atma primarily means Brahman, then when you take that one and you do the etymology of that, there are so many meanings that our scriptures talk about Atma. Apnoti iti Yama, Adatye iti Atma, Atti iti Atma, Atatvat iti Atma. In fact, there is a work called Tantra which says Atatatvacha Matrutvat Atma hi Paramo Harihi. Okay, so the ultimate meaning of Atma is my Swami, my inner controller, he who is my Antaryamin, who is my intercontroller and in my inner controller and my master. So that is the primary. If you want to take one meaning for the rest of today's class, that is the meaning of Atma. Okay, so the next one is, as soon as he talks about, so the reason why this is important is when he said Ubhautau na vijanitaha. Why? Because Jiva is not an inner controller. There is this Paramatma who is inside him, who is controlling and making sure all these things happen. The Paramatma himself is responsible for the eternality of the Jivas. Okay, so it is this inner controller who is everywhere, and that is where our Yama is leading us to understand this inner controller in us, who is also in Vaikuntha when we are there in our moksha sthiti. So then what happens is Yama goes to some really important verses of Katha Upanishad. That again, I would strongly urge you to memorize those verses. These are really important verses of Upanishads. So immediately Yama will say, you will be familiar with this verse. Anoraniyan Mahato Mahiyan Atma Asya Jantoho Nihito Guhayam Tam Akratuhu Pashyati Vitashoko Dhatu Prasadan Mahimanam Atmanaha. Okay, let's see if we can finish the rest of today's Valli. So some of these verses you will be very familiar, and I put this pictorially to summarize this. So this guy who is Antaryamin, he is Anoraniyan. He is inside the Jiva, which itself is atomic, but he is inside the Jiva itself as an Anoraniyan. Okay, not only that, but he is also Mahato Mahiyan. He is also the biggest of the biggest. Okay, so these are contradictory concepts, and Yama, what he does in the next two verses is when he talks about the greatness of the Supreme, he talks about the contradictory aspects of the Supreme, and let's see if we can deal with that before we close today's session. Yeah, so Anoraniyan means the smallest of the subtlest of the subtle, and the biggest of the big. Okay, so Anoraniyan Mahato Mahiyan Atma Asya Jantoho Nihito Guhayam. This fellow who is the biggest of the big, who is subtlest of the subtle, he is what this Atma, where is he? He is in Jantus, means all the Jivas. And inside the Jivas, in their heart, he is there as their Antaryami. So I've got this figure for you. We are all very familiar, isn't it? This is a inverted lotus flower, yeah, Pundarika. In that is similar to the thymus, which is in the mediastinum. When I say heart, it is not really the four chambers of the heart that the Vedas talk about. Hrit means middle portion of the chest. And that is where heart is, but that is where the mediastinum is, anterior, middle, and posterior mediastinum. The surgeons within this audience will be more an expert in this area. And there is the thymus in the posterior mediastinum. And within the thymus, there is this small little needle-shaped cavity. And within that is the jiva, which is blue in color here. And inside the jiva is this Antaryaman, which is Paramatma. Vamana Namaka Paramatma, that actually Yama talks about in Katha Upanishad. So this is what he is saying. This fellow is Anoraniyan Mahato Mahiyan Atma Asya Jantoho Nihitam Guhayam. Okay, so Tam Akratuhu. So there is the next word which you will be familiar when we did the previous verse about that word Aha iti Brahma Tatragatam Ahamiti. So aha iti Brahma. Ah there means Brahma. Kratuhu means it is conviction, firmness of mind. Literally yatartha jnana, that you have a clear knowledge. When you have that clear knowledge that this antaryamin is inside you, Atma asya jantoho nihitam guhayam, what happens to him? Vita shokaha. When you realize that, you lose all your sorrows. Okay. When and why? Pashyati. When he sees him. How is he seen and known? Mahimanam atmanaha. When he sees this antaryamin who is inside him as a great being, when he sees him, then he will have vita shokaha. Okay. And how will we be able to see him? There he says, Dhatu Prasadat. Okay, so these are all clear, clean words, no confusion. He says there is a sequence of what Yama is telling us. Yes, there is this antaryamin inside us. Yes, we need to see this antaryamin. Yes, we can see this antaryamin when we study the scriptures, we run our affairs of life in such a way that we can obtain his grace. Dhatu Prasadat. Dhatu is an important word. Dhata. Say Rig Veda, you're familiar when we did the creation verses, and I've just put this here to remind us. Surya Chandramaso Dhata Yata Purvam Akalpayat. This Dhata is our savior, this creator. He creates this universe exactly in the same sequence like the previous universe. Yeah. Surya Chandramaso. So the sun, the moon, and everything, every component of the universe is exactly the same in this creation, like how it was in the previous creation. And who does that? Data. So that same Data comes here as Dhatu Prasada. So Data there means the Supreme Lord, and his grace is required for us to reach that state. Tam akratuhu pashyati vita shokaha Dhatu Prasadat Mahimanam Atmanaha. Okay. So I want to close today's session. I thought we will do the rest of the Valli, but I don't think we will have time. So I will just close this one and pick up on next classes. Okay. So then he says, so remember in the previous verse, Katha Upanishad, Yama has said, Anoraniyan Mahato Mahiyan. Okay. So this is something you need to think about. When he says, I am the subtlest of the subtle and I am the biggest of the biggest, Yama says this is simultaneously. He's subtle of the subtlest and the biggest of the biggest simultaneously. That is how you have to think about him. And to bring home that message a little bit more, and this is a beautiful verse, Asino Duram Brajati, Shayano Yati Sarvataha, Kastam Madam Devam, Madanyo Nyatumarhati. Okay, so very nice. So I put some cartoons here to understand what is it that Katha Upanishad is talking about. Okay, here, yes, this chap is my antaryamin, he has said in the previous verse, and this antaryamin, this verse actually gives us an idea of the omnipresence and the omnipotency of the Supreme Lord. Yeah, this is a key concept for Sanatana Dharma. If anybody says what is a Hindu view of their Supreme Lord, one answer I would kindly request you to say is Hindus view their Supreme Lord as an omnipresent, omnipotent being who pervades all his creation. So that is a simple definition of what Sanatana Dharma's view of God is. And this is explained here. Asino Duram Rajati. So Asinaha means he's sitting in one place. Okay, that is what's it called. Look at the contradictions here. Asino Duram Vrajati. He's sitting in one place, but Duram Vrajati, but he's going everywhere. Okay, so it is not that he's getting up and going everywhere. No, he's sitting in one place, but he's also going everywhere in all other places. So these are two contradictory attributes that can be only in Brahman. Okay, so Asinaha, he's sitting in Vaikunta, Duram Vajati, but with all these various avatars, vyuhas, forms, he's going everywhere. But at the same time, he is as a Bimba Rupa, Antaryamin, and all the jivas who are all wandering around in the material universe. He is there also, and he's sitting in the Vaikunta simultaneously. So, Asinaha Duram Vrajati. The next one is also quite nice. Shayano Yati Sarvataha. He's Shayano, he's resting in one place, but he's going everywhere. Okay, so that resting is a little bit interesting. Shayano, you need to think about the Shayano. So Padmajaji was mentioning about the Sushupti state, right? In Sushupti state, when we are in the deep sleep, when we are in the close proximity of the Prajnanamaka Paramatma, we are in close proximity with him, but we don't know we are in close proximity with him, but he is always Shayanaha. He is always resting in with us, and we just don't know him. That is what that Shayano means. Look at the Shayana. Shayana, the etymology of Shayana. Sham means Ananda. Ayana means resting. Sham, Ananda, resting. So sometimes we take after a big lunch, we have a small little nap. That is Shayana. This Brahman is always in eternal bliss and he is resting or sleep. I won't say sleeping is for us, but he is just there resting. So that is Shayano. He is inside us, but Yati Sarvataha, he's going everywhere. He's inside everybody as Bimba Rupa Paramatma, but he is also there in Vaikunta, and he is also there in America and India, where there are other souls that are also running around in their lives. Okay, so these are two contradictory concepts. Think about it. Asino Duram Rajati, Shayano Yati Sarvataha. And this is simultaneously. It is not that he is sleeping and then he gets up and goes walking around, or he is sitting and then he gets up and goes walking around. No, he is simultaneously doing that. Okay? So that is an important contemplation for us. The other one there is, yes, you can then understand the idea that he is omnipresent. Yeah. So that is easy. So he is everywhere. That is what this particular two examples gives an idea. But it also is talking about some action. So there is some action there. Duram vrajati, yati sarvataha, asinaha means it's an action. He's sitting. Duram vrajati, running around everywhere. So there is an element of action there, activity there, talking about samarthya, talking about some activity of the Lord. Okay, it also talks about omnipotency of the Lord. So this is an important concept of omnipresence and omnipotent. There are many views, philosophies, and religions that talk about anything that is omnipresent cannot have a form. Okay, so that's a very common prevailing view. God is omnipresent like the sky or akasha. So how can he have a form? He is formless. So that is one logical deduction. Say, for example, Arya Samaj, Dayanand Saraswati propagated this view in his times, that God is omnipresent like sky. So how can he have a form? He is formless. Okay, so that is one view of omnipresence, means no form, formless. Okay, there is another extreme view that I just want to bring it here without being controversial. There is one view called Brahma Kumaris. Some of you may be familiar with them. For them, God is only Asinaha. He is a single point of light who sits in some transempirical plane, and he does not pervade his creation. He is an atomic entity of light sitting in some transempirical plane. So that is an extreme view of Brahma Kumaris. And according to them, God is not present in his in the physical creation. Okay, good luck to them. That is their view. And then there is the other view where God is omnipresent like the sky, but he does not have a form. But when you look at the opinion of Yama, we are interested in Yama, who is our guru. What is Yama saying? He is saying he is bringing the idea of omnipotency here. So this is important, and this is the view of Sanatana Dharma. But God is not only omnipresent, but he is also omnipotent. So he has the capacity to take a non-material form for his devotees. So he has a non-material form. This is our conclusion of the Vedic philosophy. Yes, God is formless in the sense that he doesn't have material form. Yes, God has a form, and he takes a form as a grace to his devotees and shows an aspect of his non-material form, which could be Krishna, Rama, whatever. Okay, so when you take that omnipresence and omnipotency together, then it gives you a much more colorful view of what is the impression of Brahman in Sanatana Dharma. Okay, so a small little bit of a trivia here, because we are talking deep philosophy. I just thought I'll introduce some trivia here. Shayana, this is something that I thought was interesting. Ayana means resting. Look at the English word yawn. You want to rest before you yawn, before you go to rest. So the word yawn comes from Shayana. Okay, that's a trivia there, but I don't want to spoil the spirit here about omnipresence and omnipotence. And these are two important attributes. Okay, so God has a form. Anybody who thinks God is formless have forgotten that God is omnipotent. If he is not omnipotent, that is fine. But if he is omnipotent, he certainly has the capacity to take a non-material form for his devotees. So that is the crux of what the Sanatana Dharma's view, or the Vedic philosophy's view of Krishna and Rama, and today is Rama Navami, right? Krishna, Rama, and so on. These are all non-material forms available for his devotees. Okay, so I want to conclude today's talk with this concept of Achintya Shakti. Okay, this previous two verses, look at Anoraniyan Mahato Mahiyan, Asino Duram Rajati, Shayano Yati Sarvataha. These are opposite attributes of the Lord present simultaneously in him. So this is called Achintya Adbhuta Shakti, as it's celebrated in our scriptures. So this Achintya Shakti Vicharaha itself is a big topic in Shastras. What are the natures and qualities of this Brahman? He is somebody who can have opposite attributes simultaneously, is what the Vedas talk about, and they give various names to this. It tells Achintya Shakti, Amanu Shakti, Aishwarya Shakti, Duranta Shakti, Nija Shakti, Agata, Nagatana Shakti, Ananta Shakti, and so on. It celebrates it so much. And in fact, Gita chapter 11, the Vibhuti, the Vishwarupa Adhyaya talks about all this Achintya Shakti. Yeah, so when we did Gita chapter 11 Chintana, it was all talking about this Achintya, incomprehensible, contradictory powers of the Supreme. That is Achintya Shakti. But what we also need to be very careful is we can't stretch this Achintya Shakti for too far. Say, for example, there are some folks in their dry empirical logic will say, if God is so powerful, can he be so powerful that he can destroy himself and make himself non-existent? Okay, so these are all stupid logic. Yeah, but people sometimes use this thinking that they are very clever, but that is not what the Vedas talk about. When they say Achintya Shakti, it gives some criteria. What are the criteria? Contradictory characteristics present simultaneously, like Anoraniyan Mahato Mahiyan, Asino Duram Rajati, Sayano Yati Sarvataha. Okay, then what? This comes from the Vedas, evidence from the Vedas. Katha Upanishad is what? It's part of the Krishna Yajur Veda. Krishna Yajur Veda is what? It is part of this whole body of text called Vedas. What are Vedas? Apaurushaya Granthas, and they are the source of supreme authority. So these contradictory characteristics are described in the supreme authority called the Vedas. So that is the second criteria. The third one is these contemplation of these contradictory characteristics should increase our understanding of the greatness of Lord. It should not bring our understanding of God down, such as somebody who says, if God is so omnipotent, can he destroy himself? That does not increase our understanding of the greatness of God. It is just a stupid logic. Yeah. So these are the three criteria: contradictory characteristics, evidence from the Vedas, increase our understanding of the greatness of God, which is what Yama has said in the previous two verses. Anoraniyan Mahato Mahiyan, Asino Duram Rajati, Sayano Yati Sharvataha. Okay. So we are running out of time, so I'm going to stop at that point, because I was really wanting to carry on with a few verses and then finish today's Valli and then start the second Valli, which is so beautiful with 15 verses. Yeah. So just to remind you, there are 29 verses in the first Valli. There are 26 verses in the second Valli, and then there are about 15 verses in the third Valli. So we are making our journey slowly towards this, but in a way, I think I've covered the Anoraniyan, but the next one is even more interesting. Kastam Madam Devam Madanyo Jatumarhasi. And then he goes on to talk about Ashariram Sharireshu Anavasteshu Avastitam Mahantam Vibhum Atmanam Matva Diro Nasochati. So these are all, it talks about the greatness of the Supreme. Then, of course, there is one of these most beautiful mantras of Kata Upanishad. Na ayamatma pravachanena labhyaha na medaya na mahuna shrutena yam yevesha vrunute tena labhyaha tasyaisha atma vrunute tanun swam. Na viroto dushcharitaha na ashantaha na asamahitaha na shanta manaso vapi prajnanevam apyunat. And then he finishes with this very, very beautiful verse. And I really want to spend a lot of time next time that we talk about. Yasya brahma cha kshatram cha ube bhavata odanaha mrityurasya upasechanam kayitta veda yatra saha. So he finishes this section in a very high note. Yama finishes this Valli in a very high note and in a very humble submission. Who am I? I'm nobody. I know something about this Brahman, but can anybody know everything about this Brahman? Is how he finishes this Valli. So we will touch upon all these verses in all its glory in the coming classes. So next week is a bank holiday, right? So we will keep thinking about it and see if folks are planning some long vacations with family and friends, then we may have to push this to subsequent classes. We will see how it goes. If it's feasible, we'll do next Sunday. Okay, and then what's happening is the following Sunday, we have a very, very young, talented yoga master, yoga teacher from Bangalore. She is going to be doing a session on yoga around pranayama and pranava. I think it's relevant because we are doing Katha Upanishad, so we thought it will be interesting. So that will be next week, not this Sunday, the following Sunday, in about 2 weeks' time. And then after that, we will go back to the second Valli and finish this section and probably take up 1 or 2 verses of the third Valli of the first Adhyaya. Okay, so on that note, thank you very much for listening. Krishna Pranamastu. So we can take up any questions if there are any.
Mataji, I was just researching this Vaitarana Nadi, and just to say what Wikipedia says, that it's mentioned in Garuda Purana, but it lies between Bhuloka and Naraka.
Okay.
So
Thank you, Devalji.
And the washing of the sins, but not, it sounds like a different river.
Okay, no worries. So we'll have
I think it's the hot river, hot place where Devalji said we have to pass through if we go in that way. It's in the south gate of here. That's what I was thinking, because Vaitarini is in Garuda Purana, but Viraja Nadi is mentioned in Bhagavatam. I remembered later, because that's the transcendental current of Lord Vishnu, which is taking us above the Brahma Loka, if anybody passes through there. So
very, very interesting. So I think we will have to do some research on Viraja and Vaitarini.
Yeah.
So let's do it in 2 weeks' time. Thank you very much, Devalji, for looking up Wikipedia. But my humble submission here is, to be honest, that would be the last place to go for Shastras, but I can see it as a gate to finding out more stuff. So yeah, let's do further research on that.
Flowing down and one flowing up, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what we are all doing, I think.
Hopefully. Great. Anybody else? Any questions? Thanks, Deval.
Madhuji, just one question. When we're talking about the chapter on, the shloka that describes the contradictory aspects, I think the definition of omniscient and omnipresent is very interesting, because I think in earlier interpretations, I think this whole concept of upadhi is also introduced to help understand, how can something be smaller than an atom and and bigger than the cosmos, right? So I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that, because that was a little less satisfying. This seems to just make it a little bit clearer, the definition of omniscient and omnipresent. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thanks, Harish ji. So that concept of Upadhi, I think that is a very Advaita Vedantic perspective. I think correct me if I'm wrong. So whether is that what you are alluding
Correct.
to?
Yeah, I think I had read an Advaitic point.
Yeah, so I think the answer to that question is the rules of interpretation. As I said, there are three criteria for interpreting. Yeah, the three criteria is: one is contradictory attributes, number two is that it is in the Vedas, and number three is it should enhance the greatness of Brahman. Yeah, so those three criteria are important, and the third criteria, that it should enhance the greatness of Brahman, is very, very critical point. And these three criteria is not is not somebody's ideas. It is actually, there is a work called Brahma Tarka, and Brahma Tarka was composed by Veda Vyasa himself, and in that Veda Vyasa gives these three definitions. So when you bring that concept of Upadhi, I'm not convinced it actually enhances the greatness of Brahman. It actually brings Brahman down by saying this Brahman is capable of being invaded by Upadhi. Yeah, so that is where the issue is. So maybe we pick it up next time around, but I'm glad that you found the Brahmatarka view more convincing, because anything that we put for Brahman should elevate him, not bring him down. Yeah, so we cannot say Brahman is capable of being covered by ignorance. That does not elevate Brahman, it brings him down. So that is the view of certain other schools of Vedanta, and they would take the rules of interpretation as put forward by Brahmatarka, composed by Veda Vyasa, to understand this. So I hope that answers. Pragnesh ji, you had raised your hands.
Sorry, what were the three conditions again?
The three criteria is: one is the contradictory attributes should be present simultaneously. Yeah, in the same space-time correlation, it should be there simultaneously in some entity. The second one is the evidence for that should come only from the Vedas. Yeah, it cannot be some guy who's fabricating a hypothesis. No, it has to come from Vedas. Now, nowhere in the Vedas it says an Upadhi invades Brahman. It's not there. Yeah, so that is the second issue. And the third one is these first two should elevate our comprehension about Brahman. So those are the three criteria. So if you look at contradictory attributes in these three rules, then you will get your answer. So in any areas in the scripture, if you take these three and apply those three rules, all three must be satisfied, not just two. All three must be satisfied. That's what Veda Vyasa has said, who is our founding father, as usual.
Thank you, brother.
Pragnesh, you had a question?
No, I just had a it is slightly diverging from Vedas, but the contradictory attributes of a supreme was, because today is Ram Navami and quoting Hanumanji. I don't know if people have heard about this. There is a neurologist by the name Tony Nader. He is working in Maharishi International Yoga, and he has done lots of research. In fact, he has written so many things too good to be true. But there is a video going on WhatsApp group that the only way Hanuman's character can be explained is likening like a hormonal molecule, so that Hanumanji is portrayed as going from a very tiny form to a very big form. And what he's saying is that these hormone molecules, they can penetrate very tight junctions and can have massive influence on individuals. So that was also contradictory but simultaneously present. So I was just bringing another cross reference. Tony Nader's work is too good to be true, but he's deep. He's a PhD from Boston and a very big name in neurology, but has taken over completely to the spirituality and lots of good things to learn.
That's so interesting, Pragnesh ji. Yes, I'm actually pleased that you brought those concepts of Achintya Adbhuta Shakti. That Achintya Adbhuta Shakti is there in the Supreme Brahman, yes. But you are also bringing an interesting concept. Is that kind of Achintya Adbhuta Shakti also available in certain jivas? Okay. So there are certain views about this in the Vedic scriptures itself. It's interesting that you mentioned the neurophysiologist, pharmacologist, his view on this. But there is, I will explain anyway. If there is 2-3 minutes, I'll explain what there is the Achintya Adbhuta Shakti concept for jivas, highly exalted jivas, for example. So I'll give you a simple example. So we talk about Brahmanda and we talk about Pindanda, right? So in Pindanda, we say, look, the deities of the Vedic pantheon. So you have, who are all the deities? If you look at the first 10 ranks, the Abhimani Devatas, for example, you have Vishnu at the top, then you have Sri Tattva, then Chaturmukha Brahma and Vayu, then Saraswati Bharati, then you have Garuda Sesha Rudra, then you have Sun Mahishis, then you have Sachi Suparni Parvati, then you have Indra, then you have fellows up to Daksha Prajapati, then you have Surya, Chandra and Yama, and then Varuna. So if you go through this various Vedic pantheon, there is also a gradation of Achintya Adbhuta Shakti. This is really interesting. So the Supreme Brahman's Achintya Adbhuta Shakti is an independent Achintya Adbhuta Shakti. That Adbhuta Shakti is not dependent on anybody. It is just there. Whereas there are certain folks, these Abhimani Devatas, who also have that Achintya Adbhuta Shakti, but their Achintya Adbhuta Shakti is dependent on the Supreme. So there is that dependency there. So for example, Pragnesh, you brought about Hanuman, for example. So there is a certain school of Vedanta that actually believes that Hanuman, for example, is an incarnation of Vayu Tattva. Vayu comes third in the Vedic pantheon along with Chaturmukha Brahma. Okay, so Hanuma, for example, Bhima, and so on. So there some schools of Vedanta believe that Hanuman is an incarnation of Vayu himself, and that Vayu has Achintya Adbhuta Shakti, which is dependent on the Supreme. So why is this important in the sense when we do our Brahmanda and Pindanda Upasana? So for example, there is the Vayu Loka and the Vayu is sitting there. There is a Chaturmukha Brahma, there is Chaturmukha Brahma's Loka. There is Indra, there is Indra Loka who is sitting there in Swarga. But at the same time, we are saying, so Surya is sitting in Surya Loka, Chandra is sitting in Chandra Loka. But at the same time, we are saying in our Pindanda, Surya is in the eye, Chandra is in the ear, Manas is Rudra. So we have these kind of contemplations of Abhimani Devata. So how is that possible that somebody who is in Chandra Loka, he's also sitting in our ear and making sure that our ears are working? So this one, Asinaha Duram Rajati. So it's the same concept. Asinaha, he is sitting in the Chandra Loka, but Duram Rajati in all the Pindandas in the ear. So that Achintya Adbhuta Shakti has got various gradations for contemplation. But that is for, we can think about it and then we can grasp as to how that makes sense of this elevated Tattva Abhimani Devatas that is there in the Vedic pantheon, and how do they equate into what they are doing in the material world, although they are sitting in their own abodes in Swargaloka or Devaloka or wherever. So taking that explanation, when you talk about Hanuman, for example, we know from Ramayana, right? He is small, but then he becomes a huge person. How does he do? So all that fits into that. And then there is also a concept of what's called Parashukla Trayas. So that probably will not deal with that in the Vedic scriptures. But it also implies for some Jivottamas, some highest levels of Jivos, starting from Chaturmukha and Vayu and all the way up to all the Tattva Abhimani Devatas. They also have this Achintya Adbhuta Shakti. But Pragnesh, unfortunately, we mortals don't have that. So we are all stuck here and we have to make our own progress. So that is the scheme of the universe.
Thank you for such a detailed explanation and such a nice connection. Thank you. Thank you.
Namaste, Guruji. I have a quick question. You just talked about Ajo Nityaha Shashvato, and then the Jiva Swarupas does not change in samsara. Just wanted to have a quick, the Jiva Swarupas also attached to the Jiva Swabhavas, the Sattva, Rajas, and Tamasa Gunas. Does that change when, does it change or it doesn't change along with the Jiva Swarupa?
Thank you, Jagdish ji. Very interesting question, very complicated question. So the Jiva Swarupa, Jiva's gunas and Jiva Swarupa, there is no difference. Yeah. When I talk about Jiva, I also talk about the Jiva gunas also. So that Sattva, Rajas, Tamas that you're talking about, that is an entirely separate classification and a category. That should not be confused with the Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas of the material things. So what are your material things? The material things is you have your mind, your intellect, your body, and you eat various foods that also are Rajas, Tamas, and so on. When you eat Rajas, Tamas and stuff, that will influence your Rajas, Tamas state of your material components. Your material component starts from where? It starts from Linga Sharira outwards. So Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manonmaya, Vijnanamaya, and Anandamaya. This is all the material coverings. So these material coverings have the Sattva, Rajas, Tamas states. Okay, and so these are different from the Jivas, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas states. The Jiva states are non-material states. So that is where there are differences of views in various schools of Vedanta. Some schools of Vedanta will say, look, there is nothing called the Jiva. Jiva is Brahman, that is it, and both of them are Nirguna. So that is one view. The other view will say that Jivas are there infinite in number, but by quality they are the same. There are infinite jivas, but all jivas have the same quality. What is that quality? Their ability to reach liberation and have eternal bliss, which is the same when compared to Brahman. So that is the second view. And the third view will be, look, even jivas are so many different. There are several shades of jivas, starting from the purely sattvikas like Chaturmukha and the purely tamasic like Duryodhana. And all of us are in between with various combinations of the tendencies that we call as sattva, the tendencies that we call as rajasa, and the tendencies that we call tamasa. That is about the jivas. So the jiva guna and the jiva swabhava are the same. You cannot separate these, so it is the same. So this is like as how our Mundaka Upanishad says, each jiva is like the seed. You put the seed in the ground. If it is a mango seed, it will become a mango tree. If it is a neem seed, it becomes a neem tree. But a mango seed never becomes a neem tree, or a neem seed never becomes a mango tree. So the view there is, and certainly there are, I'm just going to take from one perspective. The one perspective there is, the whole purpose of samsara is that we play out our own tendencies and eventually reach our salvation. So if we are sattvikas, for example, we will play out our sattvika tendencies in the material universe, and God provides all the facilities for us to do that so that we reach liberation. On the other hand, if we are Duryodhanas, again the God will give us all the facilities so that we play out our tendencies and go to the eternal hells. So that is the view, and I hope it answers that question. And again, it's important point you raised, Jagdishji, that I think we should not confuse Jiva Swabhava with the Sattva, Rajas, and Tamo gunas of the material world. Although there is some overlap in the sense that Sattva Jiva is very likely to have a body which will have a tendency for sadhana. So that will be there, but they are actually two different concepts. Thank you, Jagdish.
Thank you, Guru. Thanks.
So excellent. So if there are no further questions, Harish, do you want to take us through Om, please?
Sure.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe, and we'll catch up next week. And certainly, I look forward to the yoga session in 2 weeks' time. Okay. Krishna Pranamastu. Take care, everyone. Bye now.
Thank you, Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha.